She didn't belong here. That was the first thought that crossed David's mind as Emily Brooks walked into the boutique. It wasn't just the simple clothes she wore, an unremarkable gray sweater and faded jeans. It was her entire presence. She had no right to be in such an exclusive place. As she entered, the door chimed, and all eyes turned. The sales associates exchanged knowing glances, and a few customers whispered behind their hands. David, the manager, stood behind the counter, carefully watching her approach. He had seen it before, people who didn't understand their place. They came in pretending to be someone they weren't. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, with a tone that was polite on the surface but sharp underneath. Emily smiled, unaware of the silent judgment surrounding her. "Yes, I'm looking for a gift for my mother." "Something special," she said. She didn't notice the slight roll of his eyes as he glanced at her outfit, nor did she see the smirk forming on his lips. "Something special, huh? You're in the wrong place, then. These pieces aren't for everyone," he replied, his voice dripping with condescension. Emily didn't flinch. She had been through worse. She knew better than to let the words get to her. "I'm sure you have something that fits," she said with a quiet confidence, scanning the shelves for a suitable gift. David watched her for a moment longer, and then, with a dismissive motion, he gestured toward the pricier section of the store. "That one's a little too plain for someone like you," he said. His voice was louder now, just enough for the others to hear. "Perhaps you should try somewhere more affordable." Emily's face didn't change. She had seen this before, people judging her for her simplicity, assuming she was just another person trying to pretend. But she wasn't pretending. She was exactly who she was. And who she was, at this moment, was someone who had every right to be here, despite David's silent judgment. But that didn't stop him from continuing his quiet ridicule. "Are you sure you can afford this?" he asked, his tone like a blade. Emily paused for a moment, then nodded. "I'm sure." As she reached for a necklace on the counter, David raised an eyebrow, obviously skeptical. "I'll need to see some identification. We need to be sure that." He stopped mid-sentence when a new voice cut in, smooth and authoritative. "Is there a problem here?" Emily's head turned, and her heart skipped a beat. Standing in the doorway was James Brooks, her husband, the man who everyone in the store now recognized. He wasn't just any man. He was James Brooks, the billionaire investor, the owner of a portfolio worth billions. And in that moment, as he strode across the store toward Emily, everything changed. David froze. The smirk faded from his face. Emily's heart slowed, and she gave a small, knowing smile. James stopped in front of her, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "I believe there's been a mistake," James said, his voice calm and steady. David didn't speak. He couldn't. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. This wasn't just any woman. This was Emily Brooks, the wife of the man whose fortune he had only heard about in passing. The same man whose name graced every financial magazine. The same man who could buy and sell this boutique without a second thought. The room went quiet. Emily's simple appearance, her modest clothes, now seemed like a deliberate choice rather than a lack of means. "You can go now," James said to David, his words polite but firm. David stammered something, but no one heard it. The shame in his face was clear. James turned to Emily, his expression softening. "Shall we go, darling?" he asked gently. She nodded, smiling at him. As they walked out of the store, Emily felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She was exactly who she was meant to be, and no one would ever be able to take that from her. As they left the boutique, Emily could feel the eyes of the staff on her back, but she didn't care. The walk through the mall felt different now, less heavy, less judgmental. She glanced at James, who was walking beside her, his presence as commanding as ever. The sun outside was bright, the sky clear, and the whole scene seemed to have changed in an instant. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," James said quietly, his voice soft but laced with a tinge of anger that was barely contained. "Don't worry about it," Emily replied, her eyes on the pavement ahead. "It's not the first time. I've learned to ignore it." James stopped walking, his hand gently grabbing her arm. "It's not right, though. You don't deserve that kind of treatment. No one does." Emily smiled, but there was no bitterness in her smile. She wasn't angry, just resigned. "People like that don't matter, James. They don't see the whole picture, and that's fine. I've never needed to prove myself to anyone. I'm happy with what I do." James watched her for a moment, his eyes softening. I admire that about you. You're stronger than most people realize. Emily chuckled lightly. That's just how I was raised. I believe in working hard and staying humble. I don't need expensive clothes to feel good about myself. He smiled, clearly proud of her, but there was still something in his gaze, something protective, something that wanted to shield her from the unfairness of the world. Well, I'm here to make sure no one ever does that to you again, James said firmly, squeezing her hand. She looked up at him, the sun catching his features, and for a brief moment, she saw not the billionaire investor, but the man who had supported her dreams and passions without ever judging her. Thank you, she whispered. But you know, I don't need grand gestures. I just want to live my life, quietly, with you. They walked on, the world around them bustling, but for Emily, it felt like a moment of peace in a sea of chaos. They made their way to the car, an elegant black SUV parked at the curb. As James opened the door for her, she looked back at the boutique once more, the place that had tried to break her spirit but had only made her stronger. The staff was still watching, but now, it didn't matter. James's presence was a quiet reassurance that they couldn't touch her, couldn't hurt her anymore. We'll go home now, James said as they both climbed into the SUV. I think we've had enough of this place for today. Emily nodded, settling back in her seat. I agree, she said with a soft laugh. The city outside seemed to fade as the SUV pulled away, the road ahead uncertain, but for Emily, it felt like anything was possible. She had everything she needed right beside her, someone who believed in her, who saw her for who she truly was. The rest of the world could keep their judgments, their assumptions. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already won. The next day, Emily woke up to the usual quiet morning at home. The soft light streaming through the windows was a reminder of the peaceful life she had built with James, a life that felt grounded, despite the occasional storm that people like David tried to stir. She wasn't someone who needed attention or admiration. What she had was far more valuable, respect for herself and her values. As she made her way downstairs, she found James already in the kitchen, his suit jacket casually draped over the chair, preparing coffee. He turned when he heard her footsteps, offering a smile that always made her feel like she was the most important person in the world. Good morning, love, he said, his voice warm and steady. Emily smiled back, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Good morning. What's on your mind today? James leaned against the counter, watching her as she took a sip. I was thinking, he began slowly, about what happened yesterday. How that man treated you. It really bothers me. Emily set the cup down, her eyes meeting his. I told you, James, it's okay. People like that, they don't matter. But James shook his head, his expression serious. It's not about them. It's about you. You should never have to deal with that kind of disrespect, especially not from someone who's supposed to serve you. Emily took a deep breath, running her fingers over the edge of her coffee cup. I know you want to protect me, but I've learned to let go of things like that. It's their problem, not mine. James walked over, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. I just don't want you to feel like you have to hide who you are. You're so much more than what they see. Emily smiled, leaning into his touch. I don't hide who I am. I'm just me. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's enough for me. After a few moments of quiet, James straightened, his voice taking on a more serious tone. I've been thinking, it's time we let people know who you really are. Not just as my wife, but as the woman you've always been. Strong, capable, independent. Emily looked at him, a bit surprised. James, you know I don't need any of that. I've always been fine just living my life. He nodded, his eyes intense. But I think people need to see the real you. I want them to know that you're more than just my wife. You're a force in your own right. Emily paused, considering his words. She wasn't sure about the attention, but there was a part of her that realized maybe it was time to step into the light a little more. All right, she said softly, but only on my terms. James smiled, kissing her forehead. Of course, always on your terms. As the morning went on, they discussed plans for a charity event that Emily had been quietly running for years, one that helped underprivileged children access education. It wasn't something she flaunted, but James had seen the impact it had made. They had talked about making it more public, about using their platform to highlight the good that Emily was doing, not just as a wife of a billionaire, but as someone who was changing lives. Emily wasn't used to the spotlight, but as she thought about it more, she realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time. She had nothing to hide. She had nothing to prove to anyone. And if her work could help more people, then maybe it was time to step up. Later that day, as they walked out to the car, Emily felt a shift inside her. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about standing tall and proud of who she was. No one, not even the Davids of the world, could take that away from her. Emily sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone. The morning had passed peacefully, but something had shifted inside her. She couldn't stop thinking about James's words from earlier. For the first time in a long while, she wondered if it was time to let the world in, just a little. She wasn't one for grand gestures or attention, but maybe, just maybe, she had something to offer that was bigger than her own quiet life. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of James's footsteps as he walked into the room, his usual calm demeanor matching the serene atmosphere of their home. "You all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emily glanced up, offering him a small smile. "Just thinking," she said, her fingers still scrolling aimlessly. James sat down next to her, his presence grounding her. "About what?" She hesitated for a moment before putting her phone down. "About what you said earlier. About letting people see who I really am." James raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "And what do you think about it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his. "I think you're right. I've always shied away from the spotlight, but maybe it's time to share what I'm doing. Not for fame, but because it might actually make a difference." James's eyes softened, pride evident in his gaze. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with, but I'm glad you're open to it. People need to see the incredible woman I get to live with every day." Emily laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You really know how to make me feel like I can do anything." He smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Because you can." The conversation drifted to other topics, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. The idea of stepping into the light, even if just a little, felt less daunting now. Later that afternoon, she made a decision. She picked up the phone and dialed the number of the head of her charity, a woman named Sarah who had been with her from the beginning. "Hi, Sarah," Emily said when she answered. "I've been thinking about our upcoming event. I want to make it bigger. Let's get the word out more. I think it's time we let people know what we're really doing." Sarah's voice was filled with enthusiasm on the other end of the line. "That's amazing, Emily. We've been waiting for you to say that. This could really take our work to the next level." Emily felt a wave of excitement wash over her. "Let's plan a press event. We'll invite people from the community and maybe even the media. It's time they saw the impact we're making." As she hung up the phone, Emily realized how different everything felt. She was still the same woman, with the same quiet determination, but now she was ready to share that strength with others. It wasn't about validation or recognition. It was about the work that had changed lives, the work that she had spent years building without anyone knowing her name. And now, maybe, it was time for that to change. As she stood by the window, watching the world outside, she knew that this was only the beginning. James was right. She had nothing to hide. The world was about to see who she really was. The day of the event arrived, and Emily stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her outfit for the third time. She had chosen a simple yet elegant dress, something that reflected her personality without drawing too much attention. It wasn't about looking perfect, it was about feeling confident. And today, she was ready. As she looked at herself, she realized something had shifted inside her. She no longer felt the need to hide. She wasn't afraid of what people would think. She wasn't worried about being judged for her choices. Today, she was standing tall, not just as the wife of a billionaire, but as someone who had built something meaningful with her own hands. James entered the room, his face lighting up when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice filled with pride. Emily smiled and turned to him. "Thank you," she replied softly. "But I feel more than beautiful today. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." James reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You are. I'm so proud of you." As they made their way to the event, Emily's heart began to race. The venue was a large hall, filled with guests, reporters, and community leaders. The lights were bright, the buzz of conversation filled the air, and everything seemed to be moving so quickly. But Emily wasn't overwhelmed. She was ready. The moment she stepped into the room, she could feel the eyes of the crowd on her. They were all watching, curious, perhaps even skeptical. She didn't mind. She had nothing to hide. She had spent so long working quietly behind the scenes, But now it was time to let the world see the impact she had made. She approached the podium, her steps steady, her heart calm. She could hear the murmur of voices fade as she took the microphone in hand. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Thank you for being here tonight. I want to share a story with you, one that is very close to my heart. For many years, I've worked alongside incredible people, dedicating myself to a cause that has always been bigger than me. I started the Morgan Educational Foundation not for recognition, not for praise, but because I believed in the power of education. I believed that every child, regardless of where they come from, deserves a chance to succeed." As she spoke, she could see the faces of the crowd change. Some of them were nodding along, some were listening intently. She wasn't just talking about a charity. She was talking about a mission. And for the first time, Emily felt like she wasn't just part of the background. She was leading, and people were beginning to see her for who she truly was. When she finished her speech, the room erupted into applause. It wasn't the kind of applause that was polite or forced. It was genuine. People had heard her, they understood her, and they respected her. After the speech, Emily found herself surrounded by guests, asking questions, offering support, and showing genuine interest in her work. James stood by her side, his hand resting on her shoulder, proud of everything she had accomplished. As the night wore on, Emily realized that this was just the beginning. She had stepped into the light, and the world had responded. She wasn't just a woman behind the scenes anymore. She was someone who had built something real, something that would leave a legacy far beyond anything she had ever imagined. And as she looked around the room, at the people who had now recognized her, she knew that no matter what came next, she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the weeks passed, Emily found herself adjusting to the new reality she had stepped into. The Foundation's event had been a success, but more importantly, it had opened doors she hadn't even realized were there. Invitations to meet influential people, offers to collaborate on projects that could expand the Foundation's reach. It was all happening so fast. But through it all, Emily remained grounded. She knew that the attention she was receiving was not about her, but about the cause she had been fighting for all these years. Every day, she was reminded of why she started in the first place. The children, the families, the communities that had been given a chance because of the work she and her team had put in. James, ever the supportive partner, was there with her every step of the way, offering his advice and guidance, but never pushing her into anything she wasn't ready for. It was a balance they had found. He encouraged her to embrace the opportunities that came her way, but he also respected her desire to remain true to her values. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, Emily sat down at the kitchen table with James. She looked at him, her mind racing with thoughts of everything that had happened recently. "I never imagined this," she said quietly, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I knew we were doing something important, but I didn't expect this kind of recognition. Anyone, no matter their background, could make a difference." Emily wasn't just the wife of a billionaire. She wasn't just someone people looked at because of who she was married to. She was Emily Brooks, the founder of the Morgan Educational Foundation, and her work was changing the world one child at a time. As she prepared for another busy day, Emily knew that no matter what the future held, she was ready to face it. She had already proven to herself that she could be strong, that she could lead, and that she could make a lasting impact. The world was watching, but now it didn't matter. She was no longer hiding. She was standing tall, and she was ready for whatever came next. The weeks flew by, and with each passing day, Emily grew more confident in her new role. The media buzz surrounding her foundation was growing, and with it, the pressure to maintain her image. But Emily didn't mind. She had found a new purpose, one that was about more than just running a charity. It was about changing lives, making an impact that would last long after she was gone. As Emily and James sat in their living room one evening, the weight of the day's events settled in. They had just finished a meeting with a group of potential donors, and the conversation had gone well. But Emily couldn't help but feel the underlying tension. "I can't believe how much is changing," Emily said, staring out the window. "It feels like we're on the brink of something huge. But sometimes it feels a little overwhelming." James, who had been quiet for a while, turned to her. "I know it's a lot, but look at what you've done. You've taken something small, something that started with just an idea, and you've turned it into something powerful. You've changed so many lives already. Emily smiled, but it was a tired smile. I just wish it didn't come with all this attention. I don't want to be the center of it all. I just want to do the work. James nodded, his voice calm. You don't have to be the center, Emily. The work is what matters, and people will remember that. They'll remember the difference you've made, not who you are. Emily leaned back in her chair, considering his words. She had always shied away from the spotlight, preferring to stay in the background, making things happen without drawing attention to herself. But now, it seemed that the spotlight was unavoidable. The more successful the foundation became, the more people wanted to know about the woman behind it. The thought of being constantly watched was unsettling, but she knew that if she truly wanted to make a lasting difference, she would have to learn to embrace it. I guess I'll have to get used to it, she said softly. But it's just hard. I never wanted this kind of attention. I just wanted to help. James reached over, taking her hand in his. And that's exactly why you're making such a difference. People are drawn to you because of your heart, not because of what you have or who you're married to. You're doing this for the right reasons. Emily squeezed his hand, grateful for his unwavering support. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Later that evening, as Emily prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about the future. She had already accomplished so much, but there was still so much more to be done. The foundation was growing, and more children were being helped every day. But with the growth came new challenges. She was no longer just the founder of a small charity. She was a public figure now, someone who people looked to for inspiration and guidance. It was a responsibility that she didn't take lightly. As she lay in bed that night, James by her side, Emily made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let the pressure change her. She would stay true to her values, stay grounded in the work that had brought her here. And no matter how big the foundation grew, she would always remember why she started in the first place, to make a difference, one life at a time. As the foundation continued to expand, Emily found herself constantly juggling between public events, media appearances, and the day-to-day operations of the charity. She had always been good at managing things behind the scenes, but now, everything was happening in the spotlight. With each new project, there came new expectations, and with those expectations, the pressure grew. Yet, Emily remained focused on what mattered most: the children, the families, and the future she was helping to build. One afternoon, as she sat at her desk reviewing the latest donor reports, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah, the head of the foundation. We've been invited to a gala in New York next month. It's a high-profile event. They want you to be the keynote speaker. Emily stared at the message for a moment. The thought of speaking in front of hundreds of people, many of whom she didn't know, made her stomach twist with nerves. She had never liked being in the spotlight, but now, it seemed impossible to avoid. James walked into the room just as she was pondering the invitation. What's got you looking so serious? He asked, sensing her hesitation. Emily showed him the message, her finger hovering over the screen. They want me to speak at a gala in New York. It's a huge event, but I don't know if I'm ready for this kind of attention. James sat down beside her, his expression thoughtful. I know it's intimidating, but look at what you've accomplished already. This is just another opportunity for you to share your story, to show the world the work that matters. You don't have to do it alone. You've got people who believe in you, people who have been with you from the start. Emily sighed, running her hand through her hair. I just don't want to be seen as someone who's only here because of who I'm married to. I've worked so hard to build this foundation, and I don't want anyone to think I'm riding on your coattails. James gently turned her chair towards him, his eyes meeting hers. You've never been that person, Emily. People are drawn to you because of your passion and your commitment to this cause. It's not about me. It's about you and the difference you're making. Emily met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. She knew he was right. The foundation wasn't just something that had happened because of her marriage to him. It was a reflection of her heart and her vision. Slowly, she felt her anxiety begin to melt away. You're right, she said, a small smile forming on her face. I've spent so many years working behind the scenes that I forgot it's okay to step forward. Now, it's not about me being perfect. It's about sharing the story and the mission. Exactly, James said, smiling back. And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way. That night, Emily sent her acceptance to the gala organizers. She wasn't sure what to expect, but for the first time, she felt ready to face the world head-on. The event in New York was just another step in her journey, and she would take it with the same quiet determination that had always guided her. She wasn't seeking fame or recognition. She was simply sharing her purpose, her mission, and the lives that had been touched along the way. The next morning, as she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress for the gala, she realized how far she had come. She was no longer hiding. She was ready to show the world who she truly was, and more importantly, what she could do. The night of the gala arrived, and Emily felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she stood before the mirror. She had chosen a simple, elegant gown, nothing too flashy, just something that made her feel comfortable but confident. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but now, standing on the edge of it, she realized how much she had changed. She wasn't just the quiet woman who preferred to stay behind the scenes anymore. She was someone who had built something real, something that mattered. James entered the room just as she was finishing getting ready. His eyes softened as he took in her appearance. "You look incredible," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Emily smiled, feeling a wave of warmth at his words. "Thank you," she replied, her heart racing. "I'm nervous." James walked over to her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "It's okay to be nervous. Just remember, you're doing this for a reason. You've worked so hard to get here, and now it's time to share that with the world." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of his support. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm ready. Let's go." They made their way to the event, arriving at the grand venue in the heart of New York City. The building was majestic, with grand chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and guests already mingling in their finest attire. Emily could feel the eyes of the crowd on her as she walked in, but this time, it didn't bother her. She wasn't here for their approval. She was here to do something that would make a difference. As they entered the ballroom, a hush fell over the crowd. People were turning their heads, whispering to one another. Emily didn't know if it was because they recognized her or if they were simply curious about the quiet woman who had been invited to speak. But it didn't matter. She was there for one reason: to share the story of the foundation, to show them the work that was changing lives. When it was time for her to speak, Emily stepped up to the podium, her hands steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. She looked out at the sea of faces, all waiting for her to speak. "Good evening," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This event isn't about me. It's about the children whose lives we are changing, the families we are helping, and the future we are building together." As she spoke, Emily could feel herself becoming more confident. The words flowed naturally, and she could see the impact they were having on the audience. She wasn't just telling them about the foundation. She was showing them why it mattered. She shared stories of the children who had been given a chance at education, of the families who had found hope where there once was none. And with every word, Emily felt the weight of her journey lift. She was no longer hiding. She was standing in the light, and she was proud of everything she had accomplished. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. It wasn't just polite applause. It was genuine, heartfelt, and loud. Emily stood there for a moment, feeling the rush of emotions flood over her. This was it. This was the moment when everything had changed. She wasn't just the woman behind a successful charity anymore. She was the face of something much bigger than herself. After the speech, guests lined up to meet her, asking questions, offering support, and sharing their admiration. Emily felt overwhelmed, but in the best possible way. She had never imagined that something so big could come from such a small idea, and yet, here she was. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was the person driving the change, and she would continue to do so for as long as it took. As she left the stage, James was waiting for her, a proud smile on his face. "You were incredible," he said, wrapping his arms around her. "I knew you could do it." Emily smiled up at him, feeling the weight of his pride. "We did it," she said softly. "We really did." And as they walked out of the gala together, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The journey she had started years ago was now gaining momentum, and she was ready to face whatever came next. She was no longer just the quiet woman in the background. She was a leader, and she had a world to change.